So first, as Mnemonic, so we're an organization we founded in 2018 officially, although we started working in 2014 with Syrian Archive. And so we as an organization, we work globally to help human rights defenders effectively use digital documentation of human rights violations and international crimes with the goal of trying to support advocacy, justice, and accountability. And I'll talk about a couple different ways that we're doing this in terms of advocacy and legal cases and so on. So we archive, right? So we take information or data that's online, right? We scrape it, we preserve it. But archiving, right, is adding context, right? It's making it searchable. It's making it, reliable and useful, right? So applying this ontology to it, verifying and filling out some of these features, right? So in the case of Syria, in the case of Yemen, in the case of Sudan, these are like these standalone archival projects, right? We train people. So in the past 5 years or so, we trained about 1,000 people, mostly in terms of verification, archiving, how to use certain tools, how to collect certain kinds of sources, things like that. Because people from specific regions are, of course, the experts of those regions, right? So we can't be everywhere. We need to train other people in terms of how to do this kind of stuff, right? Third, as mentioned, we take the difference in the data from what we archive and what's still available online to get like real empirical data on how content moderation policies are being implemented, right? And identifying real specific case studies, right? So whether that be in the case of Palestine or Lebanon or Syria or Yemen or what have you, right? So trying to feed this into conversations with companies and governments and so on. And then finally, we build and we support open source tools and methods. So this will be some of the methods that I'm going through now, but also open source tools that we've worked on in terms of, like, for example, archiving or annotation or things like that, right? Open source being super important because we need to have the methods be inspectable, we need to have the tools be inspectable, and so on, so that if it does go before, let's say, legal proceedings, right? Or if some kind of researchers want to question the kinds of findings that are coming out, they can go back, they can look at the raw material, they can, go through this verification process on their own.
GIGN is an organization that is really a network of networks for investigative journalists. But because of the changing nature of investigation, we find more and more people outside journalism want to use our tips and tools, come to our conferences and so on. The threat level is one of the highest it's been for a long time. But ironically or strangely at the same time, the opportunities couldn't be greater, and for investigative journalists and others who are investigating. So it's this kind of strange world of increased risk, and yet it's much easier to investigate, and there's much more collaboration, which of course is the theme of the conference, a fantastic theme. And investigation doesn't really happen without it. It certainly doesn't happen with the same level of impact without collaboration. Not only is the world of investigation and journalism changing, but we found that increasingly people who were not journalists were coming to our website and asking questions and using our stuff and wanting to come to our conferences. So our view generally is that anybody investigating in the public interest is welcome to anything that we do, and we encourage their work. And we did put this guide together as a kind of primer for citizen investigation, which is a readaptation in many respects of some of the resources we already have.
Let's talk about the Investigative Commons first, to set the scene a little bit. It is both a physical and ideological space. It was set up by ECCHR, Forensic Architecture and Forensis. Forensis being Forensic Architecture's sister organization, so to speak, here in Germany. So the idea behind the Investigative Commons is to mobilize different platforms or fora to get accountability for human rights violations and environmental violence. We want to do this by working interdisciplinary with lawyers, in this case ECCHR, but also potentially other lawyers from other partnering organizations, activists, scientists, architects, filmmakers, cultural institutions, reporters, journalists, basically anyone who feels that they can contribute to a project, to an investigation that we set out. Evidence, as traditionally seen, is usually produced by states or by other actors with a power monopoly and the necessary resources. And at the Investigative Commons, we want to work under the assumption that those committing the crimes, and whether it's human rights violations or environmental violence, cannot necessarily be trusted in investigating these crimes as well. And therefore, we want to use creative and cooperative ways in which other actors, specifically non-state actors, can bring together and analyze facts, which can then later on produce evidence and which can then be presented in different fora.